welcome at this webinar of FEPS and its Nordic partners. I hear a bleep on the background. I don't know if this is, yes, it's gone. I'll start over. Hello, welcome at this webinar from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. Together with their Nordic partners, we've been working on a digital program on algorithms in the workplace. And today we have a webinar on platform work and algorithmic management. We will talk about the rise of algorithm management from platform work, from the platform economy to the more traditional sectors. We have a very distinguished speakers that I will introduce one by one, who also wrote 2 policy studies that will also be discussed. It's maybe good to say that that this will be recorded, so you could also see it later, and that you can discuss with us through the chat. If you have questions, we'll have some time for discussion. You can ask your questions, and we'll try to discuss them. Maybe it's good to introduce the first speaker. I won't lose any time. We have Christopher Lind-Glavind. He's the senior analyst at the Economic Council for the Labor Movement in Denmark, and he will present his study on employment terms of platform workers, a data-driven analysis of platforms in Denmark. Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you very much. So I will just present my slides. You see these the slides now?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you very much. I've been really looking forward to presenting this part of the digital program about algorithms in the workplace. So this part we focused on platform companies and the worker terms of platform workers, and I made this together with Jared. So big thanks to Jared for the collaboration. We've been really great. This was published in January, where we had some nice coverage. I have a little picture as well from the biggest Danish newspapers, which we were really happy about. So just briefly to say what I'm going to say, I'm going to talk a bit about the motivation for this study, and then I'll go to the results, which are in 3 parts. It's one about remunerations, there's one about self-employment, and one about web scraping. And then I will come to the conclusions and perspectives. So the motivation for this study is that many online platforms have atypical employments. So here the workers are paid in remunerations or to the worker's own firm, often a single person company. And this can potentially be used to evade employer responsibilities such as sick leave, vacation, insurance, etc. And the scope of atypical employments have been hard to examine quantitatively, at least in Denmark, because it kind of fall outside some of our regular boxes that we usually have in Denmark. So it's been done with interviews and surveys, but not with data on the actual payments to these workers. So the outset of this report is how can we examine platform workers' employment terms in a new way. So this also have some kind of exploratory nature. So what we did is that we examined this in 3 ways. First, we did it using administrative data anonymized from Statistics Denmark. This was on remuneration, that is task payment for each task. Then we examined single-person companies and the development in these using publicly available data from the Danish Company Register. And then finally, we used data that we collected from the platform's own websites. And I'll go through the results of these now. So the first part is remuneration. And what is remuneration? I'll explain the graph in a bit. So remuneration is payment for work without being employed, basically. And this is common for one-off gigs like public talks, translations, stuff like this, and have been normal in Denmark in a long time. And if you look at the overall development in how many workers receive remuneration, there have not been a big increase. It's been around 60,000 to 70,000 people. And if you look at share of the workforce, it's been almost completely flat since 2010. However, this is not evenly distributed over industries. So what we see here is that within the industry transformation, information, and communication, there all of a sudden from 2017, there was a huge increase in the number of remuneration recipients in these industries, whereas most other industries have had a really stable development. Just briefly about the transportation, information, and communication industries. This is a quite broad industry, but that is because we are limited we cannot single in on industries where single companies take up a lot of this. So this is discretionary considerations since we have amalgamated this industry. But I think it shows really clear that something is happening here in the industry where a lot of courier firms are operating. And then we can look a bit further. So which kind of workers are driving this increase? And what we see is that the increase is primarily driven by younger workers under 30 years of age, also 30 to 39 in this industry. Also, we see that if we split the sample in Danes and non-Danes, the biggest increase have been in non-Danish citizens, but there's also been a rise in Danish citizens. But together, these two facts, we take this it's driven by young and non-Danes who are likely to have less knowledge about their rights and also fewer alternatives. So these are potentially more vulnerable workers where this insecure employment form has risen dramatically over the last 5 to 8 years. So another way where you can get paid on these platforms is also utilized a lot, for example, Volt, the big fast food courier, is that you can be self-employed, where you have to start your own firm, and then instead of being employed, you are paid to the firm. So what we see here is the number of active single-person companies registered in Denmark. And this data is publicly available. And what we see is that most industries have had quite a steady development, whereas the industry, it's called other postal and courier services, have had a huge explosion since around the end of 2019. And here we're not limited by, here we can see at the specific industry level. So we can see like down on this specific, where we expect that these are a lot of workers who work as couriers for platform companies. And as an indication of this, we just try to see, okay, how many within these industries have the name Volt have vault in their name. And this is probably a bit hard to see, but what we can see is that at least 110 of these single-person companies has vault in the name. Some are simply just named Vault. One is named Vault Noah or Vault/Mohammed, which indicate that these are actually platform workers. There's, of course, no requirement that to work as a Vault courier, you have to have Vault in your company name, but still a lot of these companies have it. So the third part of this, we want to utilize that platforms are usually online in their nature. So to order a service or goods from these platforms, you have to be online, either on your laptop or your phone or somehow. So there's actually often a lot of information given in the platform. So we set out and wanted to see, okay, can we utilize this to get more information about workers' condition on these platforms. So this is also like exploratory and a proof concept, but I think we found some useful information. So what we found is that this is actually quite a fruitful method, especially where the service provider is central, for example, in cleaning platforms. If you order fast food, you're probably not that interested in who delivers it. You're more interested in what the food is. But when you order cleaning, the thing you can differentiate on is who is doing the cleaning. So on these platforms, we have two big ones in Denmark, Hilfer and Happy Helper. You actually have a lot of information about these service providers. What you can see in the picture in the slide is, for example, the schedule of one of the service providers as it looked Tuesday morning. And you can see when she is available for booking and when she's actually booked. So you can see here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you can book her all day, and she has one booking a day these days. Yes, so we get both information about how much they're available for work and how much they are actually paid to work. So here I'm just going to show the result from Hilfer, the platform Hilfer. And what we see is that the scope from this particular platform, which have been talked quite some about in the media, but the scope is actually relatively limited. So in total, there are almost 200 profiles, and of these, 66 we have defined as active, that is, have booking available in the coming week. And of these, 20 to 25 workers were booked Monday morning, at some point during the week when we looked Monday morning. And of those who were booked, which were, in 1 week, it was 23, the average income of these relatively few workers were 2,000 a week, which indicates that this is probably not the primary income for most of these workers. So this leads me to the conclusions. So what we see is there has been a massive rise in remuneration and self-employed within platform industries. This have been driven primarily of the younger part of the population and foreigners who are likely to have less knowledge about their rights and fewer alternative to this platform employment. And this is not a general picture about atypical employments overall in Denmark, but it is very specific to the platform industries. So then, going forward, some perspective maybe. We know that already in Denmark, several platform companies have actually already signed a collective agreement. This is Nemlig, which is a grocery delivery, Hilfer, which is a cleaning platform, and Just Eat, which is a food delivery platform. But there's still some companies who try to avoid responsibility as an employer. For example, Volt have had several rulings from Danish authorities that they are actually employers, but they're still trying to go through the court denying this. So it takes time, and since many platform companies are short-lived, we might risk having, like, even though in the end they might, the employees might get employee status. If this takes, as in the case of Volt, 7 years, a lot of people will be working on these terms. And this is why hopefully the new platform directive from the EU can help make the employment status more clearly. I have a great hope for this, but it will also depend on the implementation. That was all for me. Thank you.
So thank you, Christopher. This is very, very insightful, and I think as well, like you said in the beginning. So this is one of the first researchers that really looks into the data and the quantitative side of things. So where there's a lot of research, of course, into platform work and also how things work and the precarious situation of the platform workers on an individual basis. This is more, okay, it's for one country, it's only for Denmark, but more quantitative in showing, actually, as you showed in the graphs, the rise that's been there also quite recently, because you see it really in the last few years. You ended with the platform work directive, and I think it's also the moment to open up the floor, like if there's any comments from the audience or any questions that they can ask them via the chat. But it's also showing that there was a need for regulation that was very difficult to come by. I don't know, not maybe everybody followed the discussion, but there was a long delay of the platform work directive being approved by the member states mostly, also due to this difficult topic of the employment relation. So I don't know, like if you remember probably the discussion we had when we launched this in January in Copenhagen, also with one of the members of the Danish Parliament, exactly about this uncertainty. So in one of the most regulated labor markets in Europe, in Denmark, with a strong role for the social partners, they have difficulty in getting this under control. Is there anything you want to add to your research that you think, like, okay, this is now the platform work directive will help, or you maybe you don't know, but is there anything that you think, like, should we take into account?
Yeah, thank you. Like for me, doing this examination, I was actually, like, for me, like the first step of securing worker rights is recognizing that people are actually employees. And I was actually a bit surprised that a company like Volt did do so much to try to avoid this. Because So I really think that the platform directive will come and clarify these things. But this is only, as I see it, like part of the way. It's in my view, you can't not just leave it up to the platform directive. Now, now they are employees, or they will have secured employee status. But then you need to be sure that they have the proper rights in these the good working condition, basically, and this is still like a huge struggle for, or like a huge task for the labor movements to do this. Just one thing I want to just mention is that at least in Denmark we have like the the Nordic model. And I think often, like, some of the problems is I talked to some of the public relation chief at Vault, and I don't think we have a huge task in communicating how the Danish model works, because they did not understand. There is like still a difference between recognizing that you have employees and then having a collective bargaining, and they had a really hard time to distinguish between these, and this just like make the process of having fair worker rights and labor terms more longer and more difficult.
Because in the end, like you talk to them, and if it's so core to their business model, because it's also a model to save costs or to save responsibilities or costs on the responsibilities, that's making it sustainable from a financial perspective. So actually, it's like the precariousness of the workers is paying for the profits, or for not being too loss-making, because often these companies are also loss-making. So there is really a problem there. Do you think it's a misunderstanding, or it's just also like a business case that's depending on this precarious relationship? Because I don't know, like also in your data, I think one of the things that you didn't mention, it's also that not all the companies, the single person entities, often they were not making profit. Which doesn't mean that they don't get paid, because they will pay their wage, but it's not a very profitable business to be a Wolt driver. You also found that, I think. So the profits are going somewhere, I guess.
Yeah. So just to come this, like we saw that many of these platform companies is having a running deficits, which is not unusual in these kind of businesses where you hope to build the platform and put a lot of money into building the platform, and then somehow at some point making it profitable or have it bought by someone. But it then makes it more likely that some of these cease to exist before they have gotten their workers' terms under control. Whether this is just because they don't understand, like a company as maybe Vault doesn't understand the Nordic model, or it's because they are trying to avoid it, it's hard to say. It might even be both, because I'm like, at least from the perspective that I tried, there shouldn't. I can see that you can't have all the flexibility that they want, and all they have these argument that it have to be flexible. But why shouldn't you be able to have them as employees on these terms, unless it's because you want to save money or because you don't understand it? I'm having a hard time.
No, it's interesting what you said as well, like about this. They're not. It's the enforcement and the fast enforcement that's important, because if they're around for 7 years and still Denmark, even though the legal system they try to do it, they're unable to enforce it. You know, a platform company, 7 years is eternity. Like that's a very long-lived platform, and they're changing all the time. So you cannot wait 7 years before you give clarity on these kind of things. I have a question also from the audience. So Ayu Gevargese, I don't know, I probably don't pronounce it correctly. I'm very sorry. I tried. So is there any research data on the prevalence of subcontracting arrangement in Denmark platform firms? So is that something that you looked into, or maybe you came across the subcontracting? Because that's true. That's really an issue. It's not only the single person companies, but then, you know, the subcontracting, is that an issue also in Denmark?
Yeah, that's definitely also an issue in Denmark. Unfortunately, like I tried to see if I could get data on this from the registers, and we have not been able to find this connection. The problem is that you probably need to know the specific firms that you want to examine, and we can't single out any firm in the registers. But I know, like, there have been a lot of talk about Nimly, which is a grocery delivery service that had subcontracted all the couriers out, and they had terrible working conditions. and then they were like, oh, it's not our problem. So it's definitely an issue, but unfortunately, I haven't at least been able to find data on this. Though I would love to have some.
Yeah, and that's an issue as well. I think also with the regulation, also the platform work directive now, like how the subcontracting maybe is a way to avoid legislation. And I think also like that's one of the things as well that Christopher, you mentioned it as well. We will have to see now how it's going to implement in the member states, because one of the compromises of the platform work directive is to give a lot of power to the member states to implement it in their own way. Well, we heard when we were in Copenhagen from local policymakers, so from Danish members of the parliament, that it's just very hard on a national level to get control on these international platform companies. So it's a bit of a deadlock, but we'll have to see now. There is a directive, so that's a positive thing, but we have to see how it plays out in this field. I have a final thing, Christopher, from my side. If there's nothing also from the audience, I will keep an eye out, like if there's any other questions. But one thing that I would like to point out, like you mentioned at the end with the web scraping, that was very much also in the platformization of the broader economy. Volt, it's still delivery. Also, a lot of the rise, the graphs that you showed was also in the delivery, which we know is a big sector, and we can see it from your data. It is a big part, and it's very relevant, I guess, for society. How do we deal with these riders? But it's more than riders. You were looking into cleaning and into other helps. But there, like Hilfer was, it's almost like if you talk about like 200 people, okay, it's 200 people, but like, several, was it 66 were active in 1 week? You think it's a very small group. Is that because there's certain data lacking, or how do you see this? Because I think the platformization of the broader economy outside of just the delivery sector, is that really an issue, or is it bigger in the media than it's in reality? Or how do you see this with the Hilfers, for example?
Yeah, well, there's so things for this, like different platforms are and different kinds of services is big in different countries, and can also be hard to like follow this because new are coming up and old are closing all the time. But at least in Denmark, for in the cleaning industries, it's the two big like platforms are Hilfer and Happy Helper, which we looked at the scope of, which were quite limited, at least in what we would think. Also, when we look at how much these workers work, we cannot be certain that they only have cleaning work through the platform. We have no proof of this, but you could imagine that one way it worked is that you get contact to a cleaner by the platform, and then hire them in the informal economy later. I think the good thing is of this is that like there is like a clear interest that's shared for the taxpayers and the platforms that this stays in the formal economy within the platforms. But I'm not sure that that they have found the best way to do this. But that makes like the thing to make it attractive to be and keep being on the platforms is important. I would think also for the platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there is like we don't have the proof, but there's a little bit of sign maybe of a matchmaking happening on the platforms, and then maybe cleaning work has been informal for a long time, so it might move to that sector. Same with babysitting, and there's multiple apps, I think, services apps that are now happening. And it's interesting what you said, like at the end, like it could be an opportunity as well to have this like win-win situation, that you bring it more in the formal economy and give more rights while being on the platform. Perhaps we will have to see if this develops in that direction, because and as you showed as well with the super Hilfers, there are also already some collective agreements. So it might even like be a positive force, these platforms. Okay, Christopher, thank you very much. You will stay around maybe also for the discussion later, because I think like the reason why we have this this webinar is not only to talk about platform work. We talked a lot about the platform work directive just now, but half of the platform work directive is about algorithmic management, which is very much, it's something that the platform workers have experienced in the most purest form. Ayu, you just have a question. Do you want to go back? Like maybe also, because this came a bit delayed, I'll ask the last question to Christopher. So the Danish model of broadly applicable collective bargaining agreements relies on high union density. That's more comments, but there's a question. What is the union density platform work in comparison to the broader economy? Does lower union density affect the ability of unions to bring wool to the negotiation table? So it's a good question. I think this is very relevant all around Europe. Organizing platform workers. Actually, we have a publication about this as well from last year about the dark store workers. If you're interested, I can send you afterwards this study. How do you organize these workers, and are they organized? I think the Wolt workers, they're not that unionized, I'm afraid, as well, huh?
No, that's also my experience. Some are, and but these are also like often people who have like does not see this as their long-term career. So maybe they're in and out or just working few hours. So some of them are not necessarily that invested in getting a union. Like, however, I would say like to the part of the question whether this is like an area where the unions are weak, you would say. I would say like in the transportation and courier business, they overall are quite well organized. But this is also kind of some new labor forms, so they fall somehow. In some respects, they fall out of the existing labor market. So it's kind of both that we have strong unions in these areas, but not necessarily specifically in this part of the labor market.
So I think so. Your answer as well, like if I rephrase a little bit, it's not just like in the Danish system. It's also the strength of the unions overall in the sector that can also like have a strong power over a company, even though that in the company they're not unionized. I think this maybe also for afterwards and follow up, Ayu, if you're interested, like maybe we can be in touch to share info on this, because I think it's a specific way also the Danish model works with the unions and how they have collective agreements organizing the labor market in many ways. I'm not the expert either, but maybe we can connect you. I will continue as well, because I was starting already the bridge, I think, to the second part and the second two speakers that we have, because what we know, the platform workers, they've been dealing with algorithmic management in the most purest form, because they don't really have a boss in flesh often. Most often, it's just the application that's telling them what to do, how to do it, and to run their business at the daily basis. So there's like often not even a human in the loop. It's just the algorithm and the application that is running their business. The thing is, though, that we know and we've seen, and we will come as well as FEPS in the light of this digital program with some real new research and new studies. It's happening now also in traditional sectors, in the warehousing sector, in telemarketing, different other sectors, the finance sector, and it can be expected that this will grow over time in all traditional sectors. And the question is, how do we deal with that? How do we regulate that? It's also not only a topic that is of interest for us or of interest of the Nordic countries, because we're doing this research with Nordic partners in the Nordic countries, also with the Nordic trade unions. But also the European Commission already signaled that they will do an investigation, or they started the research to look if they need to regulate specifically AI in the workplace, specifically on algorithmic management, where I think it's interesting to see what's in the Platform Work Directive, which is kind of like on a sub part of the labor market regulating these issues, but maybe also other aspects. And to prepare the way for this, We have a first research, more literature-based study, but also based on a conference we organized in Stockholm of Bon Diego and Teresa Ospo-Koldova, who will get the chance to present their work, but then afterwards we can have a discussion also to see how it's coming from the platform economy, but now it's coming more to traditional sectors, and how do we deal with this, and what is the framework in which we need to think and speak about this. Bon, I give you the floor first, I think. Bon Diego is senior lecturer at the University of Jyväskylä, and the co-author, or the main author, the first author of this policy study. Bon, the floor is yours, and then we go to Teresa Ospo-Koldova afterwards of the Oslo Met. Bon.
Thank you, Gerard and Christopher. I'm trying to...
Yes.
Yeah. This is my slide. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Jyväskylä here in Finland. My name is Bon. I'm a senior lecturer in development studies. And I'm going to present in the next 10 minutes the main points of our policy study entitled Algorithms by and for the Workers Towards a Fair, Democratic, and Humane Digitalization of the Workplace. I have co-authored this with Teresa and Gerard. I would like to put in a more academic and particularly social science and political economy perspective in the discussion today. And as academics, we try to introduce and capture a lot of this phenomena into an analytical framework. These are our intellectual filter through which we understand technological dynamism and the emergence of different business techniques and managerial functions these days. In our policy study, we focus on the complex interplay between technology and work, specifically the contradictions and challenges of algorithmic management techniques on workers' rights, dignity, and well-being. So what was our problematic in the study? So we just asked, is there scope and agency for workers in the innovation process and digitalization? Our simple answer is that theoretically, yes. And then empirically, we were able to cite maybe one or two promising examples from unionized Nordic industries, plus some promising policy initiatives at the EU level. But what was our starting point? We were mindful that we're writing the research for and also commissioned by socialists and social democrats. So it's given, we come from this perspective. So from a socialist and social democratic perspective, we are not technological determinists. So we problematize capitalism, particularly the logic of capitalist development. We also have an assumption that technologies are not neutral. Therefore, technology is largely political. Our paper or policy study is divided into 4 main sections. And I'll go through and mention the main points of each and every section soon. What are the basis of our research? The materials that we used and we undertook a comprehensive review of literature. This one took a lot of time. And then we also tried to consolidate some of the preliminary findings that we gathered so far last year from the FEP's digital programs research with Nordic partners, which Gerard just mentioned. and also the ideas and discussions and consultation that we got from colleagues in the trade unions, some parliamentarians, academics, and particularly in meetings held in Oslo in April last year, and also in Stockholm in the autumn last year. First, on the context, we should understand the rise of algorithms, particularly algorithmic management in capitalism. Yeah, as Gerard mentioned, we can see algorithmic management not only being used in the gig platform economy, but now increasingly in traditional industries. So the algorithmic management techniques emerge due to the convergence of competitive demands for businesses and rapid technological advancements. So, what makes today's globalization with digital technologies different from previous globalization? Because before, we have had globalization in the world economy. Globalization, but these are globalization in terms of trade and exchange. But this is only the first time in the world history of capitalism that we have globalized production and finance. But the fundamentals in capitalist development has remained. And specifically in the digital age, we have witnessed the constant technological innovations and greater division of labor. But we should not forget that that we are also witnessing a process of proletarianization where flexible, mobile, fluid, and disposable workers are completely subsumed under capital. And I think the longest part of our policy study was in this section on the limits of existing policy and institutional frameworks. So, what are these limits? We have categorized that into four themes. One is the limitations of the real politic of political economy. So, we have competing vested interests from businesses and also political ideologies. But we should not forget the existence of regulatory capture nowadays. And we know there the first mover advantages of big techs, big tech oligarchies or big tech oligopolies. In terms of material resources and their network of political influence, in terms of lobbying for legislation and all. So that's the realpolitik. And then we also noted the temporal reasons. And by temporality, we meant the issue of timing. So the rapid technological innovation often outpaces the slow policy-making processes. And we've been observing that nowadays. And the third reason and challenge in policymaking nowadays is the spatial aspect. So technological dynamics is global, and it also requires flexible labor. But national legislation and national laws are very much national. So there is this territoriality issue involved in there. And we also witness nowadays that there are fragmented initiatives at the global, regional, and national scale. But there are also different realities. Technologies affect and impact different sectors in different country contexts differently. In terms of sectors, there are also nuances there. Yes, Christopher already mentioned about the platform economy. Even within the platform economy and gig economy itself, there are differences in there. So the challenge in legislation is really how to capture all this into a unifying dynamic. And then, of course, the challenges in terms of function. We are familiar with the concept of function creep, that, for example, a management technique or a technology has been approved for one purpose, let's say to improve efficiency of service delivery. But they are also, but on the other hand, they're also used for other negative, adverse reasons. For example, surveillance. And the fourth, we should not miss out, and this has been implied also in the discussion that Christopher and Gerard just mentioned, has to do with the ideological. You know, a lot of debates in policy discussions nowadays, even at the European Union level, GDPR, more advanced. We really like that AI Act, but the discourse is really framed within liberalism. So by liberalism, I mean the prioritization of the principle of methodological individualism. Discourses and debates have been centered on individual rights, meaning civil liberties, privacy issues. Of course, we are not against that. These are very important. But so far, GDPR, AI Act, and many other directives are not really focused on the specific context and needs and discourse of collective rights and well-being of workers. And then related to the ideological dimension in policy discussion is, of course, capitalism. Christopher also just mentioned about, and also Gerard, in the platform directives discussion. So what would be the status of work that we do? The hegemonic discourse now is that the slogan is, we are all capitalists, we are all entrepreneurs. It's different from the labor union, socialist and social democratic perspective that we used to assert we are all laborers. Even the innovators, computer programmers, data scientists, these are all workers, but they're already forgotten the kind of identity that we used to have. So we should not miss out the ideology that underpins these kinds of discourse. And lastly, of course, neoliberalism. In Europe, especially in the Nordics, we now see the right turn in politics, in parliaments. So maybe later on, I would say that neoliberalism is also accompanied with racism, which is also related with what Christopher mentioned, that more and more workers in platform economy are foreigners. And these are really racialized policies that they have and racialized perspective that they keep. And now here in Finland, labor unions are on a prolonged political strike. And what was the response of the center right-wing government? Okay, you can go on with all your strikes, but our decision won't change. So that's basically neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is an elite class project to discipline, demobilize, and de-radicalize labor. So they are now more and more insensitive to the demands of labor unions. And then, so The next section, which Teresa will focus more, was entitled Workers' Agency Participation and Co-Determination. And here we just argued that co-determination, which is a hallmark of the Nordic model, is not simply about participation, but we value here the principle of representation in worker councils, in managerial functions, and also in the innovation process. But there's no doubt that digital technology and algorithmic management technique can increase the Nordic economy's total factor productivity. Yeah, they will really contribute to efficiency. But we are asking the question, how can the Nordic model sustain and improve its other invaluable pillars, namely high wage regime, the welfare state, the principle of work-life balance, and strong labor unions and co-determination. And the last section that we had as a concluding remark on our paper is that as researchers, we put forward and also propose the importance of context-specific, problem-based, and mission-oriented kind of analysis. And we argue that the history of successful technological revolutions tell us that it is necessary to have activist states in alliance with trade unions and civil society, because states and progressive forces can really direct innovation and investments, and also production systems and consumption behavior to a pro-labor digital transition and its twin, which is called a green transition. So I'll probably just end here for now, and thank you.
And I think thank you, Bon, and you will stay around as well for the discussion. I would like to give the floor also to Teresa Osbel-Koltova, research professor at the Work Research Institute of the Oslo Metropolitan University. I think Bon did a quite extensive overview with this PowerPoint, but probably you have to add like several specific points also from your expertise and your work.
Yes, thank you, Shirad, and thanks, Bon, for introducing. This was great. And I just want to follow up a little bit on the theoretical framing and then go to some more concrete points. When we speak of capitalism, I think what is important in this context when you're talking about platforms, both in the gig economy and algorithmic management in traditional work, we have to kind of take a little bit of a step back and recognize the enormous expansion of the data universe we're facing. I mean, the surveillance capitalism, the monetization of data, the monetization of our data as clients, customers, suppliers, as workers, it's enormous, and it is growing every day, this kind of data economy. And of course, lots of businesses thrive on that, and we have kind of come to idolize this data economy and have gained a lot of faith in data. We believe in data-driven decisions and so forth. And we want to have data as a basis for decision making, be it automated or by humans. But we have invested an enormous amount of faith, let's say, in this kind of data, and this is important because this kind of already reveals the kind of ideological dimension of the data economy, and of course there's lots of social research showing that, of course, there's lots of bias in these data sets. Data sets are never complete. It's impossible to have complete data on every single data point that is of relevance to making decisions. So there is a certain kind of naivety and this kind of positivism and a kind of naive positivism that that underpins these kind of notions of algorithmic management and governance and so forth. And so we have this interest of the big tech in perpetuating this, and now the AI hype, and many of it can be real, many of it we see lots of these products are actually halfway managed by real workers that are hidden in global south. So the data doesn't produce itself. In many ways, it has to be processed by human labor. And so we have that enormous growth on one side, and on the other side, we have seen an enormous growth of what some have called regulatory capitalism. So we have more and more regulations, more and more kind of compliance, soft and hard law, lots of initiatives that also impact or are translated into data-driven products. So again, they are captured a little bit, this kind of translation of regulation into practice is captured by the same kind of consulting and tech industry. And this is also an important moment for understanding what algorithmic management, or what I kind of maybe prefer, algorithmic governance in the traditional workplace like banking or universities or now healthcare sector, you name it, how it plays out. Because we see that lots of these management and governance platforms are really platforms that are increasingly combining different functions. So you would combine HR with security, with performance management, with compliance. And that can be regulatory compliance for anti-corruption, anti-money laundering, cybersecurity under different security laws. You have to comply and so forth. So we have this proliferation of compliance requirements, and this will only increase when we get this AI Act. And this will be another thing that companies, of course, have to, both employers and the companies producing these technologies will have to have processes and documentation and so forth. So only the data hunger kind of increases also through these regulatory pressures, which are good, but have also these consequences. And what has been kind of the most pronounced observation, let's say, in our interviews with people in the banking sector, financial industry, people in the media and journalism, was that you see this platformization where you don't know if the platform is a managerial platform, HR platform, compliance platform, security platform, where you don't know you don't know because it is precisely hybridized by default. And so whenever a new regulation comes, you add it to the platform, for instance. And so they are very concerned, at least the workers and trade union representatives we talked to, about this function creep, and also the inability of the companies where they work to know actually what happens to the data, who uses it. Because when they ask their leaders and top management, can you please deliver all these lists with all the software you're using in this company, where does the data go, who uses it, what are you collecting, they find out very quickly that the company top management can't deliver that. And also they find that, this is, I think, another crucial point, is that all these platforms are, of course, not neutral. They are political inherently, let's say, but they are very difficult to change for the workers. We often tend to think, well, can we include the workers in developing these platforms? But this becomes very unrealistic when the platform is maybe Microsoft Purview, which risk scores maybe all the employees and flags them for compliance breaches, let's say. So you have of course that problem where not only the workers and the trade union representatives, but also the management feels powerless vis-a-vis these systems. So they are both kind of responsible for implementation in the workplace, but they are also merely purchasers or procurers. So they can influence a little bit of that implementation, how we will implement this technology in our workplace maybe, and that we can discuss if we are willing to, but not really the basic premises of how these architectures are structured to control work and to make the workers more efficient or whatever, and machine-like. And I think a key realization here is that technological change is by default organizational change. So when we struggle in the platform work for recognizing workers as employees, I think when it comes to algorithmic management in the traditional work, we should struggle for making the definition such that it is clear that any implementation of new technology means organizational change. It changes the task, it changes the pace of work, it changes the allocation of work likely. So lots of these technologies transform mean organizational change within, for instance, new hierarchies, new managerial processes, and so forth. And under the Nordic model, or at least under a lot of collective agreements that we have, maybe not everywhere, but under a lot of them, organizational change is by definition something you can negotiate about, or at least have consultation rights, not mere information. What we see now is, okay, when under the AI Act, when it comes, and the employer is obliged to inform the workers about implementation of high-risk technologies, for instance, but they do not have any consultation rights. If you conceptualize this technology as organizational change, at least in the Nordics, you would have the possibility to say, well, this is not something we should merely be informed about, but something that we should negotiate. So this is, I think, very important. And also, what we see is that lots of the when you have the implementation of technology, there is lots of reactivity afterwards, but we need a little bit more proactive engagement and including the workers in the process. I don't know how long I've been speaking. You just
not too long, but we have time, so you can spend a few more minutes. But then there's also time for discussion. I don't know if you
yeah, we can have a discussion.
Wrap up in a few minutes. It's okay. You don't have to rush.
No, but I think it's also important to consider.
It's valid points. I'm curious to get in and to ask a lot of questions and start a discussion, but you can finish off. No problem.
Well, I just want to say that there is one thing that we should be aware about, and this is always when it comes to the kind of function creep, that you have the legitimate interest clause, right? And what is legitimate interest when you combine the platforms? And also the point that honestly, to try to challenge these systems within a workplace is extremely difficult for people, because you really have to be almost a data scientist and a lawyer. And the complexity, regulatory and data complexity, is such that we want transparency, we want to know more about algorithms, we want explainability, but in practice we often see that we really don't understand. Not even the data scientists are able to explain. And so the question is if we should approach it maybe differently, because we are already kind of be drowning in information and disclosures and so forth. I see it all the time in compliance. You have so many disclosures, but you don't know what is the important point. And so one possibility is that we could include in maybe as a solution that the trade unions would have a right for external expertise funded by the employer, because they it's not possible for workers within jobs to actually have the capacity to challenge that reasonably and so forth. So there's a really huge kind of knowledge power relation that's very difficult to balance, I feel. So
no, I think this is if we can maybe start up the discussion, because I think this is very much a valid point, because what you mentioned now about having an expert funded by the company, I know it's a practice that's been around as well, not in every country, of course, because every labor law system is different, or every rights of the trade unions. That's also Europe, so every member state has a bit of a different system, so it's very difficult to change things from the EU level. And the question is always also, do we want to change it from the EU level? It's better maybe to do it nationally, more tailor-made. But there have been, I know also in the Netherlands, they are allowed the trade unions to get expertise on the cost of the company, but also in the Platform Work Directive, in this algorithmic management chapter of the Platform Work Directive, this is explicitly mentioned. And this, there's a lot of discussions now also about this AI in the workplace proposal. When I talk to the Commission staff, without naming them specifically, but they've signaled as well that this chapter it's very relevant for the work that they're going to do on the AI in the workplace in general for all the workers, because the Platform Work Directive is of course alone as only for part of the society, for part of the workforce, for the platform workers, not for everybody. But this expertise, external expertise, it's specifically in there, and it might be duplicated for all workers. But that's I think a discussion that will come. And Teresa, like you also mentioned the AI Act, and it's interesting to bring this in, because it is mentioned, of course, the workplace is a high-risk use case. The AI Act is actually a risk-based approach on stuff that is unacceptable risk, this banned, stuff that is not allowed to do at all. Well, in the labor force, and I don't think that also our case is to ban all of these like innovations, which can sometimes also help workers, but they are high risk. And the question is indeed, like what you said, like there is already maybe even more than information rights, and we shouldn't lose the right. So I think this is also very important when we move forward, not to worsen the situation for maybe, in the Nordic context, I think very relevant, for stronger union rights than we might have in a specific regulation. I don't think that the AI Act, now the information right, would supersede the rights that they are already there. I don't think they just come on top and they come next to it and there are extra rights in the law. But yeah, we need to watch out with this, because for me, what I take from both Bon and Teresa, maybe that's good for the discussion. And if there's any questions as well, please ask them in the chat, because then we can have a bit of a discussion. What I really see as well, both from Bon and Teresa, is that, like when it comes to the power balance between workers and as well, like translating the workers' rights and the way to have co-determination in the Nordic model, but I think all around Europe, workers' rights are implemented with trade unions and with a certain tripartite negotiations, collective agreements. All of this is under pressure through this new developments. So we should also think about like, how do we translate these new developments? It's not that the workers' right needs to change, but we need to at least keep the workers' rights that we have in the new context, in a new situation where, and that's where it's very interesting, Teresa, maybe to continue on that, about like management not being in control and, being part of this. Bon, you talked a bit about capitalism, but the surveillance capitalism model where a lot of the data is actually the value that's extracted. So companies are making money off data. And so how does this work in the workplace? GDPR, yeah, it's interesting and it's relevant, but it's about private data. How about like the collective data, the collective data that you had, a collective knowledge in a workforce? I don't know, Bon, if you want to come in maybe on Teresa, like about like this management not being in control on the black box. How do you look at that? Did you hear me, Bon?
Yeah. Yes, I heard you, but I don't have specific comments on that. I thought Teresa would mention about the management aspect.
Yes,
Okay.
no, I can take over. I think what is interesting, and I think in most, we see kind of a shift where on one hand, the decisions to implement new technologies are very often at the hands of procurement departments who are not in any official formal way involved in kind of the co-determination fora that we have here. So it is still seen as a purely technical decision, and so forth. But we see that, of course, the technology really changes the dynamic. For instance, you have effectivization technologies that, you had a kind of management department for your budget, for making budgets, project budgets, and so forth. And the new system is introduced, and suddenly, whoosh, it is the researchers that become responsible for, getting data from the platform and so forth. So the labor is actually shifted. You save the costs in the administration, but you just offload the labor onto maybe like the other workers within the organization, like that, just by virtue of introducing a new technological product, basically. But, it is not being thought about that in that way. So this is a fundamental problem that we have to kind of shift the decision about buying in new technologies from procurement to kind of higher level managerial decisions. And then on the top level, you have another issue that today just, I haven't really managed to read the whole report today, but our colleagues at the Institute, they published a study, it's in Norwegian, but it's on HR and co-determination. And they show how the relationship between management and trade union representatives has changed, where suddenly HR is the primary point of contact. And this is a really interesting change, because you see that, you know, they are not really responsible. They don't have managerial responsibility, but very often the trade unions representatives have to relate to them as if they had it. So very often you see top leadership kind of resigning that responsibility to HR that doesn't really have managerial power or legitimacy in the responsibility. And this is really interesting move if you consider the way HR has been integrated into these platforms, and the data about workers, you know, performance management and so forth, and sick leaves, you know, all these kind of data can tell you together something about, you know, is the worker likely to leave the company, or maybe leak some documents? Is there some kind of threat or risk connected to the worker, or what about the performance and so forth? So this is interesting that the HR is now like the primary partner for the co-determination apparatus, and maybe this is not a healthy development because you lose touch with the people who actually are in the position of power in the organization. So this is just something that just struck me maybe as interesting finding.
So is this now, do you think it's a connected development, or it's a separate development as well? Like Bon also mentioned, I think in the end, about like the trade unions not being taken seriously from the political side, or the power of organized labor is reducing due to the political situation. And then you have this, you know, HRification of the negotiations on the same time, plus then also less control from the workers and the management on this algorithmic management that's coming in, and the interplay between those. Do you think it's connected, or it's two separate things? It's relevant context for us to keep in mind when we talk about these things.
Yeah. I just have to mention that, you know, when you ask about the managers being also on a black box, because they are also not so knowledgeable about the rapid changes in technologies that are used in algorithmic management. We always talk about transparency because we would like to protect about data privacy and security. But I think a more difficult and also crucial aspect in legislation is the determination of accountability. You know, who's gonna be accountable for, let's say, Teresa mentioned about data leaks, you know, for the data that would cause harm, because you always have the presumption of good faith on the part of the managers. They would say, the managers at some point would say, I'm excused to that because I was not aware. I'm not really, so familiar about the technology, what would be its consequences and happening. So, and of course, managers also have their own rights. And I think it will be trickier to think about legislation on the question of accountability. That is, I think transparency is easier, but accountability is it's the one that that would be subjected to penalty or the penal laws.
It's interesting what you said, Bon, because like this is very much a discussion now. Like when you talk about this topic, it's a human-centric AI, and you called as well, like you know, algorithms for the worker was the title of your study, also to give a bit of a positive case. But then you're talking about like a human in the loop is maybe one step, but maybe the human should be in command. And then it's good what you said about like, you know, maybe it's comfortable as well for the management not to be completely in command or in control or in, you know, because then they can also hide their responsibility, although I think they could still be held accountable for that. But I think that's the reality that we face, that in a lot of companies, in a lot of instances, people don't know and they still use it because all the competitors use it. That's also your case that you made as well. The competitive pressure is there to use it and to innovate and to use it also like for a good reason, to be more efficient and to have some gains. But at what cost, and who is in the end accountable? It's very hard to keep Microsoft accountable or another company that's there. Christopher, you wanted to also come in with the reaction. I saw your question for that.
Yeah, just a comment that made me think. Thank you very much, Ban and Teresa. So what this made me think about is like with the big players, whether it's algorithmic management or just big tech in general, is that there are these things where both the low marginal cost, like there's a big, it's really, really expensive to develop these systems, but the marginal cost to have an extra user is really, really low, makes that propensity to winner takes all markets. Plus, as you mentioned, Teresa, the hybrid thing of these systems have some lock-in effects, because if you're already using Excel and PowerPoint, then it's very easy to use Power BI or whatever from Microsoft, for example. And this makes, and since these firms are global, you have to be very, very big to have any market power and have any influence how to influence these firms. We have like a big struggle in Denmark with all the municipalities. Okay, the single municipality cannot hold Microsoft accountable, but all the municipalities in Denmark can't either. They have no influence about Microsoft. Maybe the European Union together will, I would guess so, but it needs to be at this level, and that's why it's very, very important, and that we handle this also at a European level. And another just perspective of why this is so important is because this is part of our infrastructure, and how infrastructure is organized and structured influence and to a large extent control how we behave. And somehow we have lost the control of our own digital infrastructure. So we have licensed this out to some big private firms that does not necessarily have the best interest of all the citizens more to their shareholders. And I'm not saying that this cannot work and this is a terrible system, but it definitely have some flaws that we really need to regulate on an international level.
No, it's interesting what you mentioned, Christopher, because like what you said about the communes in Denmark, I came across the case as well of the Dutch government. So I'm from the Netherlands, so I heard from there that, for example, Microsoft Teams, so the Dutch government, so the public service, they did negotiate a specific sets, so a specific package, specific adjustments to Microsoft Teams before implementing it. But that's a whole country. It's also not a small country, so it's a big country with a lot of money involved, probably procurement-wise. It was interesting, but like, you know, not everybody has the side, not every company has the side. Like SMEs would never be able to do it. One commune wouldn't be able to do it, only if they team up, and even then it's hard. And what you said about the infrastructure is very interesting. Is actually also something that we as FEPS are looking into, like more generally, like public digital infrastructure, and how do we relate to that, and what's the role of Europe, what's the role of the member states, how do we get back control of our digital infrastructure, and it's I think it's interesting to point out, like, we talk about this when it comes to our social media, when it comes to like our email service, cloud services, and also like a lot of things that are essential. But once it comes to the workplace and how we are managed and how we are, like in our workers' rights, it's another layer that's coming now. If you understand what I mean, I hope I'm clear. Like, we have it already in several instances in our lives that we could say, like, hey, is it healthy that big tech is controlling this part of our lives, our social sphere, for example, and the media sphere? But now it's coming to our work. It's another layer that's coming on top of it, and another impact on people, and another set of risks. And if we look at the past, we shouldn't be too confident that without regulation or without the right approach, this will go all smoothly and all very good. So I have a question from an anonymous follower. I wouldn't agree that GDPR does not consider collective rights. Quite the contrary. Special categories of the personal data are particularly protected, and these include data that are shared with others, gender, religion, indeed, trade union membership. So I think this is also for Teresa and Bon, because I think it's very relevant for the work, because this is not the final publication. We are working now also on, this was actually one of the starting publications. Both Christopher's and your publication was the first of this digital program, and there's more to follow, more specific, more concrete, like on what are we going to do, what are we going to request or demand or put into a process at the European level with the policy making. So how does GDPR already, because what I also understood, GDPR is not always enforced or not always respected already. Maybe Teresa, I see you're not, maybe you could come in on this, like how is this also not only about new workers' rights, but also enforcing the existing data rights? I think this is a very relevant point where we shouldn't just let go and say like, oh, we need new rules, while the current rules are maybe not applied in the right way.
Yes, so when it comes to GDPR, what we see is there is some enforcement, there are some enforcement actions, but they're very few. I just checked the statistics actually today, and if you look at Czech Republic, for instance, there have been 26 enforcement actions since the very beginning. So it's not very much, and it's a lot of them are actually quite small sums. So we often hear about the big ones where you give a big fine, but those are very few and very rare. So there is certainly, and this will be the risk with all other regulation of this sort in the future. It's very difficult. It takes many years to be successful in these actions. When it comes to what I think Bon was mentioning, there is no collective right to information about what data is being collected on you. You can only claim your individual right. So we can go to your employer, for instance, and ask, okay, what all data do you have on me? But you cannot do it as a trade union. You cannot say we want to have a data, not even the concrete data, because they will give you the personal data. You might not be interested in that. You might be interested in what type of data is being collected, but GDPR does not give you the right to do that. So there was this lawsuit that this fellow mentioned in the conference, during the conference in Stockholm that we had, where there was some lawsuit to that effect in Sweden, where the trade unions tried to argue precisely the case for collective rights, but they were turned down by the court. So this is not possible. And this is, I think, the point of contention where you kind of need to argue for collective rights to you don't need the actual personal data, but you need to know what type of data is being collected and what type of metadata is being collected and how it is being used. And this is, the difficult information to gain from for trade union representatives from the employers, again, because maybe the employers don't even know and they don't have the ability to know, because lots of these technologies are sourced for third parties and so forth. Also regarding these regulations, when you look at the AI Act, I think it says, it's a discretionary judgment, really, what you define as high risk. It says, a significant risk of a high risk of significant harm to fundamental rights. But it is up to the tech company to decide in the first place what that actually means. So you will, as an effect of that kind of risk-based approach to regulation, you will see, again, the same types of companies, compliance consulting, big four consulting companies, or tech audit companies, and so forth, coming and, developing private systems of accreditation or verification or standards and so forth. Again, this will be a new type of revenue and a new type of market as a result. But the question is to what degree this will actually have any real impact on securing precisely these fundamental rights, let's say. And privacy is also a fundamental right, but we do not really see it. let's say, complied with, even in the workplace and so forth. So this is like kind of the inherent danger, I would say, of these risk-based approaches, because you always have to ask who will be translating them in practice and how. You could imagine a system where, high risk would be defined together with workers in some kind of, where you would have more power given to workers in deciding that. But if you just give it to the tech vendors, this might not be guaranteed. Also, you see the risk being perceived in a very kind of technocratic way, let's say, and a kind of tick box exercise, legalistic and so forth. You do not really consider social impacts or unintended consequences and so forth in these processes. So this is something I think we also need to think about in the future.
And I think so. You mentioned this whole new industry, arriving to make money out of the compliance. We would at least want to have also like an industry of advisors of trade unions to to build expertise and to be a counterbalance as one of the demands. But I totally get it. And I think also like what you're saying, it's also the reason why I think this is a very specific case, because the European Commission, they also signaled, okay, we did the AI Act. We're not going to make sector specific AI legislation. This is it, right? And we never know, because maybe the developments will outpace the regulation. There will be new regulation, but the AI Act is the AI Act, and that's the AI legislation for everything and everybody. But when it comes to work is something that is like also Bon said before, we're all workers, so it's all gonna affect us. So this is still like, it's not one sector, it's cross-sectoral, it's for everybody. It's such an important part of life that we cannot just disregard it. And I think it was Christopher saying it as well, like these global companies, we cannot do that per region or per member state. We should really do this on a European level, because also the expertise and the power to have a counterbalancing power to these big companies is not on the national level, but more on the European level. So it's good to know that. I don't know if there's any more questions from the audience. I didn't see them, so I think it's also a good time to wrap up. I don't know if anybody wants a final comment, either Christopher, Bon, or Teresa. If you have something to add before we close this webinar.
Yeah, just a few things picking on what was mentioned. Of course, algorithmic management techniques are altering the power dynamics between workers and employers in favor of employers and the capitalists. Many of the labor laws that we have right now have been designed during the pre-digital age. But the pre-digital age, all these labor laws were informed strongly on the basis of socialist and social democratic principles. And they still exist. And many of these provisions, though what we call sleeping clauses now, could be invoked at this time and age of the digital economy. But I think we should also think about co-determination, the principle that we are promoting here, as a risk management strategy. Co-determination in terms of participation and representation. So if you have that, that means you socialize and collectivize the risk in implementing algorithmic management and also innovation process. But when Christopher was mentioning about marginal cost and all, I just had in mind another concept in economics to think about why would workers agree to be subjected in this kind of data extraction and surveillance. And it has to do with opportunity cost. It's this rational decision making of workers that just what's worse than not being subjected to data extraction and exploitation is not to have a job at all. So they look at the that the data that they provide and the consent that they give as opportunity costs that are bearable, that can just easily forego, but not realizing that it also has significant implication for them over the long term. Because at the moment, because of this so much individualism and liberalist kind of thinking, um, we are actually being denied of our own identity as workers and laborers, because the trend right now is to have this process of identity formation, that you are entrepreneurs, you are liberated capitalists, you can just you don't have any more bosses, um, and that kind of identity formation is also jeopardizing the the reason for existence of labor unions. And I think we should really guard against these kinds of trends at the moment, and really unpack the ideological underpinning of this, because sometimes we have this what do you call this one, the paradox of 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 perspective. As most of the time we just look at these things individually, but if this same thing, like the data extraction done individually, is just consolidated and accumulated, it has larger impact to the collective identity and well-being of workers and the whole of society. So I think I think that's also the point why we were noting the problem if we have so much focus on individualistic kind of perspective, and forgetting the collective and socialized aspect of processes and phenomena. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock, so we are running at the end. If you don't mind, I will just close it off with some final remarks, because, like I said during our discussion, it's not the last of the publication. It was actually the first two publications. So please stay in touch, because we are now working on a worker survey on algorithmic management in 4 countries, in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And also, Teresa, you're one of the authors as well of the case studies that we are conducting in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. So there will be more publications coming, also more concrete, and I guess also more advanced, building on the discussion that we had today, on getting to really concrete proposals for policy and how to deal with this challenge that is real. We know, and that will also show, like when we have the worker survey, we will show how many, it's really like a majority of the workers that we interviewed have already been confronted with these tools. So it's not really a futuristic discussion. It's really a discussion that is happening now. It's now that also the trade unions should have like their say, and the workers should have their say to counterbalance a bit of the power disbalance that is being created and being worsened actually in favor of the employer. Where we have to see what will be the solution also within the Nordic societies and the Nordic model. So I want to thank you very much, and please stay in touch. If you are interested, you can slide with the authors. Thank you very much, Bon, Teresa, and Christopher, for your time, and hope to see you another time. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.